All fantasy settings need bad guys, and with orcs being some of the most classic of them, let's give them a Spec Evo reimagining. Hello everyone! Orcs are stereotypical fantasy evil guys, characterized in general terms for being strong, savage brutes. And with how fleshed out they've been in more recent works, I believe we have some good amount of stuff to give them a Spec Evo version. Please like, hype and subscribe to keep the forces of evil at bay. And now, without further ado, let's get started. As much as we'd like to say otherwise, truth is humans, and most sapient species, can turn to war and conflict quite easily when first contacting other civilizations. And in this process, it's not unusual for them to end up demonizing each other beyond all measure. Orcs, which have given themselves the scientific name of Orcus, really funny guys, are macrozoids, the same clade as some of the largest modern species of zoid, such as Oni. The ancestors of orcs were omnivores, and being smaller and physically weaker than most of their relatives, they relied on intimidation and strategizing in order to steal kills from other, mightier predators, as well as preventing their own food from being stolen. This behavior required them to be mindful of other animals, how they behaved and how to better face them, and so favored a gradual increase in intelligence that would lead them to sapiency. As their intelligence grew, orcs began using their forehoofs for manipulation of the environment, and in time they developed not only the finer motor skills that allowed them to develop tool use, but also a bipedal stance that left their hands free to work in this way. However, unlike what happened with humans, the shorter legs of orcs made them much less adept at long-distance walking, meaning the expansion of this species was limited compared to that of elves and ourselves, being more similar to that of dwarves. The social life of early orc ancestors was much more disorganized than that of dwarves or humans, as they did not form long-term groups at any point of their lives. Instead, these ancestral macrozoids tended to live alone, mostly joining with each other in hunting parties as a result of convenience, without their allegiance involving a sense of belonging or loyalty. Such feelings would only develop as the orcs evolved sapiency, since their new status, as well as the greater developmental needs of their young, greatly favored long-term packs on which any member benefited from caring after and being cared for by the others. It was this change that allowed their increasing intelligence to result in the development of a language and the beginnings of culture, advancing orcs on the way towards civilization. These hunting parties would turn to exploration and gathering as well, with the orcs taking advantage of their prodigious sense of smell to recognize herbs and fungi in their environment, identifying these and even many of their properties and components on the fly. This ability led to their incredible skill in medicine making and their culinary tradition, modernly recognized across the world. That said, their relatively deficient eyesight and hearing would lead to them becoming extremely alert and jumpy, taking extreme defensive measures upon detecting the least possible signal of danger in their vicinity. While long-range observation would only be possible once they developed technologically, these limitations allowed orcs to develop very keen short-range observation skills. Since these abilities are an integral part of life in their society, orcs will be trained in living in nature, foraging, and survival skills since piglethood, usually devoting a large portion of their youth and formation to participating in these kinds of expeditions. Thus, the skills that formed the backbone of their budding civilization are retained across generations. Aside from hunting and gathering parties, one of the main economical activities of the orcs includes animal husbandry, as their loose social lifestyle allows them to adapt to those of other animals. Exploiting pre-existing hierarchies is the main way sapiens initiate the process of domestication, so this is particularly easy to do for the orcs. Unfortunately, when cultures meet and find differences between themselves and the others, things can take a turn for the worse pretty quick, and so the ancient clashes between humans and orcs have become the stuff of modern legends. While the origin of these conflicts is currently unknown, we do know that many orcs at the time, outlawed from their own societies, had taken to raiding the settlements of other sapient species, and this led to the impression of orcs as violent warmongers, and even, in the worst cases, as cannibals and man-eaters, an impression that has taken a long-standing peace and constant efforts to combat. Truth be told, sapiens eating other sapiens is something found quite abhorrent by all known species, orcs included, and such behavior is enough to gain the offender quite the punishment from their own. Worst of all, humans at the time had good relations with both dwarves and elves, leading to orcs having to face both the scorn and the blades of most other nations. Even after this era of conflict ended, some modern orc leaders have attempted to use this erroneous image as a way to lead orcs into war, boasting a false glorious past. But then again, this kind of beast rears its face in all known species. And that's it for Speculative Biology look into orcs, and a big thank you to Alec Foisey for commissioning this one. Orcs as suits were an easy pick, since in many works they are characterized by having boar-like tusks, and also since some creatures based on the orcs, like moblins, are pig-based themselves. This was also surprisingly easy to fit in with the senses, abilities and skills that orcs have in many works, such as Dungeons & Dragons, which fit well with the traits and physical characteristics of real-life suits. A big part of this episode was changing orcs from the idea of universally evil monsters to something more balanced, with their own lights and shadows. Something we, of course, are not the first to try. After all, if we assume all orcs are as seen in the Lord of the Rings movies, the most famous example we know, it would be impossible for anything resembling a civilization to be developed. Even Tolkien himself found issues with morality regarding orcs in his own works, so to simplify here, we just made that aspect a result of external impressions and mischaracterization, as tends to happen during wars. So it was real nice bringing this episode to the channel. I hope you've enjoyed this foray into the world of fantasy so far. Of course, huge thanks to everyone who wanted to see this episode, finally rounding up the last of the big 3 fantasy races, but I'm open to bringing any others you may think of to the channel in the future. And also, thank you to our researchers and research associates who support us through Patreon and YouTube memberships, and to Alec for sponsoring this one. Remember, you too can join in if you want to support our channel, and of course partake in some really cool perks, like seeing all of our creatures and videos before anyone else and give your ideas on all episodes being produced. Or you can also like, subscribe, or write a comment telling me any type of creature you would like me to give the Spec Evo treatment in the show. Any of those really help the channel a lot. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time on the Speculative Wildlife Research Center.